Hey, Tolerators, this is Natalie, and before we get to the meat of the episode, I had some quick announcements to all the men I've tolerated before. First, we have our fall merch available in our merchandise store, so make sure that you get yourself to the link in the show notes to check out our tarot-inspired and spooky-inspired anti-misogyny merch. Our Patreon is currently running a 7-day free trial on all tiers. So if you join the Patreon now, your first week is free and you could binge all of our bonus episodes where we get to have a deep dive into the friendship I have with some of our most beloved guests. We are also having a monthly newsletter and a bi-weekly blog post, and that information can also be found at the link in our show notes. Please make sure to check out all of these changes and also follow us on Instagram at Men I've Tolerated Pod or TikTok at NatalieK124 so you can see all of these changes happening in real time. Enjoy the episode. Hey, Tolerators! This is To All the Men I've Tolerated Before with Natalie Katona, your weekly look at everyday misogyny. Today, my guest is Gisselle, and she is one of the hosts of the Strong Sunflowers podcast. The mission of her show is to guide women into living a life that they enjoy wholeheartedly and feel empowered to advocate for themselves. Today, we will be discussing how to have intentional relationships with people who help you bloom and how to avoid relationships that do not serve you. Thanks so much for being here.
It is my pleasure to be here. I'm so excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. I think what we should probably start with is that when you reached out to me and we kind of had our initial meeting, it was because you had this relationship that kind of made you realize that, like, oh, I really need to reframe what it's like when I'm in a relationship and how I make sure to continue to honor myself. Why don't you talk to me and give me a little bit more of a detail on that relationship?
Yes. So when we first talked, I was telling you about my 2-year situationship. A little recap about my life, a little tea, sprinkle. I got married at 19 to my first boyfriend. And I come from a very religious background. We don't talk about sex. We don't really talk about dating. We don't talk about anything. Plus, it's not like my parents were very involved in my life. So we didn't talk about anything as well. So yeah, no information, just going through the world and getting the information from the world, which is not the best place to get it sometimes when you're growing up. So I married my first boyfriend. And recently I just got a new discovery of just subconsciously the things that stay with you. I remember when I was younger, so I'm talking like middle school, freshman year in high school, because I came from a religious background, I didn't believe in sex before marriage. I remember I brought that up to one of my really close friends. She was my best friend at the time. And she was like, oh, well, who's going to love you? If, people kind of like the whole test drive thing. Like, who's going to want to be with you if you are not giving it up, basically. So growing up now, I'm 27 now, and I was like, dude, maybe subconsciously that has stayed in my mind. Yeah, kind of like, oh my gosh, just get what you can get, Like, who's gonna want to be with me? So yeah, I married my first boyfriend. So that's how that went. And then in that relationship, I learned so much of myself afterwards doing the work. Just because, I didn't know anything about how to be in a relationship, about myself. I was just lost, and I know I was unhappy. So finding the courage to get there and leave, even though he was a good guy, one of the things that I say now is he might be a good guy, but he is not the good guy for you.
I think that's one thing where we get really hung up on, and it's like we start keeping score with our own brain. Like, well, I don't like these 3 things, but I like these 3 things, and that's enough to stay. And I see that happening so much just with relationships I'm observing where I'm like, you're kind of an outsider looking in and you're like, I think this has run its course, but we'll just see how long they keep tugging it along. And I know that friends have had to do that for me too when they're like, I don't think you like him anymore, Natalie. And I'm like, yeah, I just don't have anything better to do. So I guess this will be it.
And you, hey, Queen, you always have better things to do. You know, work on your money, work on your podcast, travel the world, eat good food, not wasting it with a man that it's not providing. It's not even providing the bare minimum. After my marriage and after like my divorce, I start learning about myself. I start the podcast, The Strong Sunflowers, and it's all about helping people become strong as sunflowers, really getting people to have self-love, self-care, set boundaries, say no, stand up for themselves and other, fail their way to success, set like all those things. So that has helped me grow so much. But after my marriage, I think after my divorce, maybe like a couple of months later, I meet this new guy and we were definitely both and we still talk. We're still really good friends till this day. We definitely met each other where we're trying to heal. And sometimes through the healing, we can both be toxic and we can fall into those toxic tendencies that we had before. So, 5 years married. And then I got into this 2-year-old situationship, like 2 years of my life. And again, coming from a podcast that we talk about all about self-love and self-care and truly building a home for yourself, I learned last year there's definitely levels to this shit. There's levels to it because it was on my birthday and I was in Italy. I was in Capri and the clock struck 12 and I literally broke down. I was bawling, crying, panic attack. Like, I'm like, I want to go home. I am so unhappy. Like, what the hell am I doing? Like, all throughout my head, I was like, I went from someone's wife, not that I wanted to be that anyways, but then I went to someone's, I don't know, this limbo. I was in this limbo of emotions that I'm like, I'm doing relationship stuff, but I'm not in a relationship and I shouldn't be expecting anything, but you still expect it because we're human. And when it doesn't happen, we're just literally stabbing ourselves in the heart. After that little meltdown, I literally came back. I call my birthdays usually like a rebirth because I'm always like shedding skin and like, okay, how are we evolving? How are we leveling up? So I came back home and I was like, yeah, this is not working for me. I gotta bounce that ass out of here. That's what I say. I gotta go. I gotta
go. I know that in my last situationship, which I think was also a big eye opener for me, where I was like, we have to start. Like, I had to start personally, like, valuing myself and making sure that I was at the forefront of every move that I was making. Because I think there was such a perfect storm of love bombing while also keeping me at an arm's length happening in that situationship that I would find myself, like, really comfortable and be like, well, why would I pursue other things or keep it casual or whatever when it feels like my needs are being met? And then whenever that person wasn't in front of me, my whole body would just have panic symptoms. I'd be like, why are you so nervous about where he is? And why do you care? Because it's supposed to be casual.
But it's not casual. And it's so funny. I was going through pictures that I had or my notes, and I found this note that I wrote a year ago. And it kind of talked about that limbo that I was feeling because I had gone to go buy a car because I got into a car accident. And I remember it's bringing me back to these notes. So like part of the note, it's saying, it hurts my feelings when they asked you at the car dealership and you said, we're just friends. Again, we know we're just friends, but it still hurts because deep down we may want it to be something else or we're just attached. We have formed this attachment. And I also wrote, it hurts my feelings when we talk about your brother's wedding and you basically said you didn't take people you're seeing to a family function. I'm like, okay, what? Like me now, like definitely have leveled up and I look at that and I'm like, oh my gosh, like how much hurt was that Gisselle going through to be okay with that bare ass minimum because it's a no for me.
Yeah, I don't have like, I'm sure I do if I like went through my gratitude journal or my morning journal. I don't have like notes on my phone. And I'm a big like screenshot of text messages and then purging them from my phone. But I remember just like sitting with it and like writing poems about how much more I should have meant to that person. Like we were doing all of this. And then at the end of the day, when it started to just like cross that threshold of like, I don't know, it feels like you care about me, then it was all over.
Yeah, right now I'm reading a book. It's called, I don't know if you do your pod in video form, but it's called Welcome Home. And it's 10 out of 10 recommend. I feel like, again, the intention of this podcast is to remind women or men that might be in this position out there that you have to build a home within yourself first. And she talks about that literally in the first page. She's like, the problem that people have is that they build their homes in other people. They build their worth. They build their value. They build that they're worthy in someone else. And then when that person walks away, there goes your value, there goes your worth. You feel worthless, you feel not wanted, you feel not worthy, you feel like you have nothing. But if you take the time to work in your home, build your mansion. And another thing, because I was reading it today, and the pages that I was reading today was like, not everybody that knocks at your door is worthy of you letting in. When we feel so insecure about ourselves, it's like, oh my, again, back to me marrying my first boyfriend. It's like, oh my gosh, someone knocked on our door. Yes, we have to let them in. The guest. No. Now I'm like, this is VIP only, okay? Like, who are you? What are your credentials? Do you have an appointment? Like,
I am like taking my social circle by storm because I am a person who loves to go to a concert by themselves and like make friends for the evening. But sometimes you're making friends for the evening out of people that you're going to see again because it's book club or trivia or another like community thing. And then I let these people into my like inner circle. And then months later, after the like excitement of a new friendship and relationship has worn off, I'm like, wait a minute. At the end of the day, I might regret every time I invite you to something. And I'm trying to get more intentional about that because I realize that like part of it is my initial spark. Like, oh, look, we're making friends. We're doing the thing that we love to do. But then I have to sit there and be like, wait a minute. You know how far you've healed and you know how much limited time you have for social activities. That time has to be intentional. It can't just be like spending it with a person who isn't elevating your social life, it's diminishing your social life. And now people, I'm sure that I shock a lot of people because I'll just say like, oh no, they're not invited. I'm over hanging out with them.
cut out of the field. Okay, bye. You're a pest. You're a pest in my field, and I ain't got time for that.
I'm so sorry. Like, I'm sure that someone will enjoy the energy that you're bringing to these social situations, but I'm not, and therefore I can't do it. And I think we've demonized that way of thinking in our culture. I feel like when we choose to be like, you know what, I just don't like that, people are like, what? How could you not like just anyone wanting to be your friend or in a relationship with you? It's that you get what you get and you don't throw a fit mindset.
Yes, definitely. And that, I mean, the other day I was talking to my friend, I was like, why do we expect everyone to like us when we ourselves don't like everyone? Like, I don't like everybody, okay? And the older I get, the more comfortable I get with knowing that I am not for everybody, okay? And why do we have to feel so hurt when people say we're not for them? Like, keep it moving. If I'm not for you, say less. I'm going to go to a field that is for me because most 99% of the time, you're not for me. The vibe ain't vibing. The math ain't mathing, right?
I love the math ain't mathing. I say it like it's my get out of like jail card when I just want to be like, this situation is ridiculous, but I don't want to go into why. I just go, the math ain't mathing. Like, come on.
It doesn't have to have a reason. Like, it's just not what I want, especially being in this social circle and having a podcast, and you interview a lot of people and you talk to a lot of people, and especially like since my podcast is about motivating people and helping them elevate their lives and advocating for themselves and others and become strong sunflowers, differentiating the social field, like online from like my field, just because I post positive things and like want you to level up in your life does not mean that I want you in my personal field and destroy what I got going on. Like, you got to build your own field, and no shame about it, no disrespect, but you're just not part of my field. And making those boundaries and being okay with those boundaries. Yeah.
I think that's like one of the things I had to retrain my brain to be like, you have to push through boundaries being uncomfortable for you to build. Because if you never get past, like, it was uncomfy, so I just let that person do whatever they wanted while they were around me, then it's never gonna feel comfortable to build boundaries. And now I'm just feral with it. And I'm like, no, that's not for me. Bye. Walk away.
And I think that's definitely a sign of growth when we are comfortable letting other people be uncomfortable, because that's them. That's on them. If they feel uncomfortable with my boundaries to make me feel comfortable, like, I'm not going to change that because you don't like what I have to say. And recently, I started, I got on Hinge. Oh my gosh, I don't do dating sites because I'm not a person that I'm not attracted by like physical. Like, I mean, yes, the physical, sprinkle, but I'm mostly attracted by your mind. Like, what can you bring to the table? Like, let's elevate each other, growth mindset, right? And I was talking to this guy and I really liked him. And I was like, yeah, he went to Egypt. I'm going to Egypt for my birthday. And then we were talking. And then suddenly he like ghosts me for like a week. And then he comes back. And I'm like, and he's like, oh, like, I've been having family problems. Like, one of his friends passed away or whatever. And I was like, okay, like, I'm so sorry for your loss. But at the same time, like, I don't know you. So, yeah, you gotta communicate.
Yeah.
Because if you don't communicate, then I'm gonna make my own story and be like, okay, he's not interested, moving on.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh no, I'm interested, blah, blah, blah. And then it happens again. And he texts me a week later. And he says, hey, I don't reply. And then he texts me like, are you still alive? And I'm like, yeah, are you alive? And then like, I was like, yeah, this is not working out for me. I don't like instability. Like, you're not communicating the way that I need the communication to be. So yeah, I'm gonna bounce that ass out of here. And he replies and he's like, you're the only, again, gaslighting, right? You're the only girl I've been talking to for like the last 2 months. What do you mean? You're done with, does that mean you're done with me? Are you seeing someone else? And I'm like, what? I'm choosing me. I am choosing me. And I feel like a lot of the times when we have our boundaries and we let these people cross them and kind of like step all over them, especially when people that we like, when people that we love, when people that we want to keep around, and we don't enforce our boundaries because we're scared that they're going to leave. Yeah, that they're not going to accept our boundaries. And we want them to stay. But then we keep putting up with the bullshit because, again, we don't have that self-confidence or that self-love or that home within us. But when we do have that home within us, like, you can get out. This is my house. So, like, it felt amazing to actually be like, hey, this is not working for me. You may be super cute. You may be a nice guy. You may be all this. But, yeah, it's a no for me. And not being afraid that those boundaries, he was going to walk away. Like, I was totally 100% okay with that. Like, you can go. You can go, sir.
I once was in a relationship where it was like the testing field of like, what if I took my new confidence out on this relationship and actually made myself the center point of whether or not I was happy instead of whether or not I was making someone else happy. And I would just tell him, I'd be like, he cracked a joke about my sister, and it was about my sister and my dad's relationship. My dad had canceled plans on my sister and I was frustrated about it. And he did like an old timey, like, guess your sister is pretty boring, chuckle. And I was like, no. I was like, that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is the audacity to have my sister just wait around for you when you have no business, like, wanting to hang out with her, or you're not going to actually spend the time with her. And then he got super insecurely pissed off because I had basically told him he wasn't funny. And he's like, I was making a joke. Comedy is very important to me. And I think I said, if comedy was really important to you, I think your jokes would land.
Now that's funny. Big tips.
And we're at Target and we're just like giving one another the silent treatment and whatever. And then I told him, I was like, when I share things about my family, that is a point of vulnerability. And it's because I'm trying to connect with you. It's not really like a playground for you to work out your next bit. And he said that he kind of understood and he apologized. And I thought we had squashed it. And then when it was like time to have dinner, because I had moved along because I had said my piece and I was over it, he all of a sudden is like bereft with frustration. He's like, it just feels like you're trying to change me. And now I have to watch what I say around you. You don't even want me to be funny, even though that's so important to me. I was like, no, I just want you. It's such a red flag when I'm asking you to respect me and your initial reaction is it feels like you're ripping joy from me by asking me to respect you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. If my boundaries, and I feel like it's so important, part of that, creating your own home within yourself so you don't fall trapped to these bare minimum and just getting whatever anybody's trying to give you, is knowing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like? What don't you don't like? If you're bringing something I don't like, I'm going to know from the beginning. I'm like, yeah, it's not going to work for me. It's going to be a no.
From my experience in my 20s, when I didn't know myself very well, it was very easy to make those allowances for men to just tell me that everything was okay. Everything's fine. I was just being funny. Everything's fine. You weren't waiting around for me all day to actually confirm our plans. Everything's fine. I'll plan a date next week. And because I was just in this like mindset of, well, yeah, this is what dating is. This is what relationships are. It's compromise. It's trying to figure out each other's communication styles. It's this and that. And I'm like, and what is important? Because when you don't know yourself and you don't know what's important to you, it turns out nothing is important to you. So it's like, I don't care that he blew me off. I don't care that he made a joke on my against me and is making fun of me publicly, because that would mean that I would care.
Correct. And if we care, then it would hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to hurt regardless. We just pretend it doesn't. If we just erase all of that and just don't put ourselves in situations like that. And when we don't work on ourselves, like no matter how many, like after maybe months of dealing with this guy, like another one just like him is going to pop up right after him. And if you don't learn yourself and learn your boundaries and know who you are and what you're looking for, then it's just gonna keep repeating. You're gonna keep messing with the same men that are not good for you.
Do you still have any contact with that former situationship, or was it done and done?
No. The funny thing, our lease actually ends in like 2 months. So he's my roommate.
I love it.
Plot twist. But no, like I said earlier, like we're still really good friends. We met each other when we were both trying to heal. So me from the get-go, we were very communicative at least when it came to that. So when it comes to boundaries and when it comes to like just talking it out and communicating that, like, hey, this is not working for me. And we talked about that before moving in with each other. So when it did happen, it wasn't like, oh, what's this conversation? Is this an awkward one? No, like, this is what we talked about.
So I tried to be friends with both of my situationships. One when I was in my early 20s that ended because I moved out of state, and he was a guy that I had known in high school and in college. We were really good friends. And I was like, I guess this part of our story is just over. And then I just watched him pale from head to toe because he's like, well, why would this be over? Because I was like, oh, is this the moment that you're going to decide that you have feelings? Because I've had feelings for 6 years and they've just gone unsaid and and disrespected. So it's a little late, sir. And I upset him. But then in my early 30s, late 20s with this situationship, he ended it. We were going to try and continue to be friends because we were part of the same friend group. And then he threw a tantrum the first time he had to see me at a social gathering. And then it all came out like lies, seeing other, like just withholding information, telling our friends that, like, well, Natalie was just bringing out in me all of these things that I didn't like about myself, and went on some ridiculous tour of defaming me. And then he lost all of his friends and I think his cat in the same weekend. So it really just worked out for him.
It worked out perfectly for him. I always say, like, I guess he's my friend now. So, like, when me and him talk, like, I'm just so glad that this whole hot mess happened with each other. Just because I know from, like, what other people tell me, like, out there, like, there's just so much crazy guys in, like, situationships, like, way worse than mine. Mine was pretty, like, mild. Like, we're here for each other, we supported each other. Like, I had to have surgery. Like, he helped pay for my bills. So, like, because I couldn't work, or, like, I would take him to his doctor's appointments. So, like, it's just always been love there. And, like, you could feel that. You could connect to that. We were just open as well to, like, I knew and he knew that we weren't meant to be together like that, just because what we want from life is so different, because we talked about what we wanted.
I think one of the, like, red herrings of, like, situationships is, well, this is my friend, so no matter what, they'll treat me well at the end of the day. And then that's not always true, because they're their own single entity with feelings about what is also going on. So it's one of those things where before my first situationship and I crossed a naked threshold, as I like to call it, he was supporting me. He was being very helpful through a breakup, my parents' divorce. You know, he was the guy I could call in the middle of the night and he would come and get me. And then we entered into, like, the naked era of our friendship. And then all of a sudden he had to, like, pretend to be hard and be like, why are you texting me all day? And I'm like, I thought you'd want to see these titties. Am I wrong? And then, so sorry. And so it's the play acting of being so hard on it. And then in my second situationship, it was like the exact opposite. He couldn't get enough of me right up until the day he went, that's enough, and ended it. So then I was, and I think I told him one time, I was like, hey, for someone who doesn't want me to be their wifey, you keep talking to me like I'm your wifey. I'm trying to keep this, like, loose, casual, fun, off the cuff or whatever. And you have, like, boyfriend expectations. And I think that's always really hard to navigate. And I think it's like going back to that Hinge guy where you said, this isn't working out for me, I'm going to bounce. And they think that they have, like, the right to still deserve your time and argue for why that is.
Like, court dismiss, honey. Court dismiss. Like, I didn't even reply. I'm like, there's no argument. I don't have to say nothing. And it was funny because he's like, he used the word relation. He's like, I've been working in this relationship for 2 months. I didn't reply, but in my mind, I was like, what relationship? I haven't even met you, sir. We don't even know each other. We're trying to get to know each other, and so far, you just seem very inconsistent, and you don't know what you want, and I ain't got time for that. So I gotta go. I gotta go.
I know that I was conditioned when I was younger to believe, and this plays into, like, a lot of it. Like, I wasn't very attractive in middle school or high school. I am a plus size woman. Just all of these, like, little qualifiers that made me believe that in order to have a relationship at all, his needs would have to be put first. And I just never think about whether or not I'm happy.
Totally relate to that. Again, I married my first boyfriend.
Right. How often in that marriage did you go, am I happy?
And correct, because especially, again, religious background, you're supposed to try to make your husband happy. Mm-hmm. And I be a supportive wife. I remember, I always joke, I still joke with him. He actually called me, like, last week. My ex-husband still calls me. Again, I'm still friends with him. So far, like, the 2 relationships in life have been I'm still pretty casual with
Yeah.
both of them in the sense I'm like, hey, how are you? You good? Perfect. Um, but marrying my first, I lost my train of track. What was I talking
Um,
about?
whether or not you had thought about your own happiness in your first marriage.
Oh yes, because coming from religious background, you're taught it's like you're supposed to be a submissive wife, a follower basically. Your husband is the leader, and I remember I took that as like, oh, I'm supposed to support him in everything, not in like I have my own things to say and my own voice and all that. And of course, when we submit our voice and not speak up, like it's gonna cost us some build up, and then we're just gonna explode at some time. One year that I did like 10 W-2s because he would come home and he'll be like, "Oh, I quit my job. Yeah, I hated it there." I was like, "Okay, it's okay, honey. You'll find another job." And not like our bills were never paid because he always, I don't know how he did it to make sure they were, but he would just come home and be like, yeah, I quit my job. Yeah, I didn't like it. The people there were mean.
And it'll work out.
And it would work out.
Whoever bless the man who actually does watch a woman who's been conditioned to put all of his needs first and then like be like, well, should I check in on her and see if that's what's actually should be going on? Because we talk a lot about how misogyny and the patriarchy have also set up men because, of course, they thrive under the system of like, well, look, she wants to make me happy. Isn't that what the whole deal is? But then we end up so frustrated because we have inactive partners or inconsiderate partners or whatever. And they're just blindsided because all of their needs are met. And as far as they're concerned, that's exactly what should be happening.
Yeah. And I personally, in my case, the people that I guess I've dealt with, like my ex-husband, he didn't expect much from me. Again, we got married when I was 19. So again, moving out of my house, my first relationship, I'm a wife now. I start college. I'm a pre-medical student. I work full time. Like, just all the new things all at once. I don't know how to cook. So my ex-husband didn't expect so much of like the normal wife duties, I should say, even though we came from like a very religious background. I'm just glad that didn't happen. But I just, I don't know, I was just so unhappy. I think I was just playing a role that I was taught to be, and I was not doing that role very well because that was not the role that I wanted to begin with. So.
And I think that's a role that we've seen not mirrored. That's the example that we've been able to observe with older generations is the older women who are divorced in my life. When we talk about their divorces, it's always like, well, it just didn't feel like the right time to leave because nothing was too dramatic. And yet I knew I wasn't happy. And I was like, so it has to be one of the other. It has to just be like, apathy or it's too dramatic to actually survive.
And that I can relate to because it was very hard to separate religion and my husband at the time. Because again, you build this up of like, wait till marriage. So I was kind of pissed with God. I'm like, I did everything you said. I went to church every Sunday. I took the sacrament. I waited till marriage. I didn't do any drugs. I checked all the boxes. I did all the things, and then this is what I get. This is what I get. You know. So for some time, it was very hard to separate my husband from my my spiritual. Not more spiritual, but just like from God Himself.
Yeah.
Because for me, like God gave me this husband, and I'm like, okay, if this is the husband that you gave me, you must not love me very much because what the hell is this? You know, and not saying that my ex-husband was bad or anything. I was just like, it was just not the guy for me, and I felt trapped. And I think towards the end, when I finally filed for divorce, I think the straw that broke the camel's back was what you're saying. It's like, God, I am so unhappy. Like, what does it take? What does it need to happen for me to be okay living? Does my husband have to beat me? Is that the excuse? And now I can file? Why does it have to get there? Why can it just be enough that I'm just miserable and unhappy because I don't want to be here?
And I think we get fed that narrative, because I know in past relationships, there were a lot of older people who went, so you're just not into it? Could you try being into it? Like, just try harder. And I'm like, well, why do I have to try hard to be into this person when I could just dump this person and move on? And then I think the story I was always fed was, you don't always know that there's going to be a second or a third or a fourth person who's going to want you around. And it's that unknown piece of it that they always used to like terrify us back into the relationship.
And I think with that, from the perspective of like the older generation, I feel like when they look at us now, they're like, oh my gosh, you guys can't stick to anything. Like if something goes wrong, you move on to the next. But that's not what love and a marriage is. You know, you're going to have hard times. And I think for me, doing the work and going through therapy, I feel like it started because of how our marriage started. That's why, like, the roots of it were toxic. And it wasn't because there was not love there. It wasn't because we didn't get super along. It was just that I was not supposed to be there to begin with, because this is not what relationship compatibility wise, like, we were not it. And it didn't matter if we worked more on the marriage or if, like, just our mindsets, what we wanted from life, how we viewed life, like, was just not matching up. And I think because I realized that, because at first, of course, you were like, I want to fix it. I want to do everything that I can because, again, Mormon religion, it's like, you don't get married to get divorced. You try to work it out.
Right.
And I tried to work it out. And it was just not, again, when you take away, now the older I get, I'm just like, this is me and this is what you get. Like, I don't play those masks games of like, oh, I'm going to put this mask because I know you're going to like me. No, this is me. And if you can't love me like this, you don't deserve me like that. Okay? The more I peeled like layers of my marriage, because it was 5 years of me just peeling off my masks of what the church had taught me to how I was supposed to act and what I truly wanted, then that's when I'm like, okay, we're not really in sync. We're not really matching to move forward.
And if I have to hear one more time, like someone be like, well, you're dating for marriage, right? No, I'm dating to like pass time. I don't know. I'm dating to see if I can build a connection with someone or a free meal, depending on what my bank account looks like that day. But this whole idea of like every date that you go on is like an audition, like, will I get an engagement ring or not? It's so exhausting.
I think dating should be for fun.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Like, let's experience life. Let's do fun things, and maybe whatever happens after that, maybe, yes. Definitely I believe that we should be intentional. Again, don't go on a date with someone that you have nothing in common, or you're not even attracted to it. That's important. But yeah, I think we don't date enough. Like, dating is supposed to be how we figure out what we like, what we don't like, who we like, what kind of person we do like, what we like to do. Do we like an adventurous man? Do we like a man that leads? I don't know. You gotta go try it out. Go try out all the flavors.
When we did our episode about religion and my separation from the Christian faith and all of that, I talked about how I was like, how would I know if I like dating women? God had already told me that I would disappoint my entire family if I tried. And it's just like that. We don't experiment. We don't explore. We're literally just told to like lock it down and then buy a house with that man and put your name on property with him. So it's even messier when you try to get out. Have a couple kids.
Right away. A couple of kids right away. As soon as you get married.
Because I think part of my frustration when I observe relationships that are happening in my orbit is I'm like, you keep telling me that you're a captive in your relationship and you don't actually like this, but we're also so aware that our society doesn't offer free daycare for working parents across the board. Healthcare is a huge issue. It takes about 2 incomes now to be able to afford rent and groceries. So there are all of these things holding us captive in these relationships that I'm like, and I will never get married because I don't want to be trapped being like, but I need his health insurance. That's where I'm at.
Oh my gosh, and that's definitely a place that I don't think anybody wants to be.
There's all of these pressures, and then I use the word captive. Actually, it was my therapist who used the word captive when I was talking about, being trapped in a relationship, but not being able to communicate to the people around you why you're continuing the relationship, and the people around you knowing that maybe you like the signals you're still giving to people are, I don't want to be in this relationship, but here I am. And my therapist said, she was like, that sounds like being held captive. And I was like, oh, I have been held captive in relationships before because I would think about leaving and then I would prioritize everyone's opinions or everyone's feelings or my reputation or any of these things that at the end of the day don't make up who I am, but I would allow myself to be trapped in a box with another person that I didn't like because I valued all of those things more than I valued my happiness. What would people think of me?
And who was keeping who captive? Because it sounds like you were keeping yourself captive. And my therapist always says, like, the people in our lives are a mirror of us. Like, what we need to still work on, the reflection of where we are at the moment. And definitely when I met my situationship, or my friend at the time, he was a mirror of all the things. I was still looking, again, I had just left my marriage, so I was still looking for a safe space, and he provided that safe space. He still is a safe space. He provided I could feel the pain because he was healing from his own stuff, and I could feel his own pain. And because I'm an empath, like, I could relate to that. I could relate to the pain. I could relate to not wanted or see whatever it may be. So that even drawn us more to each other. But he was definitely a mirror for me, and from that I learned so much.
No, my last situationship was first off, he was a distraction. I was trying to come to terms with the fact that I hated teaching and that I had a teacher's degree and only knew how to be a teacher, but I hated it. And it was 6 years into the job and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. So he was a great, like, fun time distraction while I was trying to figure my shit out. Plus, he kept telling me how brilliantly smart and talented I was, which was something that I needed to be spoon-fed at the time because I was trying to make big life moves. And when the relationship or the situationship ended and I was telling people, I was like, I mean, it just feels like he would listen to all of the things that I would tell other people were really important to me. And then I would feel so seen because he relayed them back to me. They were like, yes, that's how gaslighting works. They just repeat things that they hear you say. And then you're like, I feel so comforted. I'm pretty sure that when I was in my last situationship, I understood gaslighting. I did not understand love bombing because I, for whatever reason, have continued to just take things at face value. So if you tell me something, I'm like, oh, you just told me I'm great. I believe you. You think I'm great. And then I walk away, never thinking of the underlying motivations at all.
Yes, which are very important because, again, what I was listening to Steve Harvey, which I love Steve Harvey, and he was just saying, like, stop telling these men out here what you want. When a guy asks you, it's like, oh, so what are you looking for in a guy? He's asking you for the most part because he wants to copy and paste whatever you say. It's like, oh, I want someone that gets me flowers. Whatever gets me into your pants, okay, flowers, what else? They're taking notes. Like, oh, I like a man that's like, you're giving them directions to to your house. Again, when it comes to, like, welcome home and creating your home, you're giving them directions on, like, so this is how you get there, and this is the key. It's under the little frog at the front. Like, no, like, keep these men guessing. What do we want in a man? We want a consistent man. We want a man that can lead. Things that they'll show us what consistency means to them, and then it's like, oh, trash. We don't want that.
Man, Steve Harvey, you hit it because I'm so tired of the narrative of like, well, just teach them how to love you. Absolutely not. Like, I have the time to teach you how to love me. You're supposed to be in a relationship because you were capable of loving me. So I will literally just bounce from person to person until I go, that one does it right. Because right is different for everybody else.
And to a certain degree, you can teach someone to love you. Like, for example, when you're learning your partner, that's something that I learned after my divorce. Like, physical touch is not a super high on my love language. I mean, it's there now. But before, like, quality time was really important to me. My ex-husband drove semi-trucks. He was not home for like most of the month. So quality time was really hard. So for him, his love language was physical touch. It's like, if I don't have any quality time, I don't want any physical touch. So it was like at odds, you know? So I think like learning your partner, like what they love, like their love language is important because then you can love them better the way that they want to be loved. Like some people like gifts. Some people like spending quality time. Some people like love acts of services. I love acts of service. That's one of my top two love languages. But like things like that, usually when you're with someone, you can catch on, like you can communicate, and then you can act upon that. But all the other stuff, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't talk to this girl, or like this thing on Instagram, or do these weirdly awkward things that don't look good. Like you should know that, you know.
Yeah.
Or like get jokes like on my behalf or
Yeah.
make fun of me. Like you should know that. That's not how I want to be loved. If that's how you show love, good for you. I respect that, but that's not how I want to be loved.
Yeah. Find the person who's going to look at you and go, that way. That's what I wanted all along. Because I think we're in this like try hard area of like committed relationships where it's like once you're in it, you're in it. And you never think like, well, maybe one day this could end because it's run its course. It just becomes daily like maintenance, which I understand that relationships require maintenance. But when maintenance is the only purpose of that relationship or the only focus of that relationship, I have a hard time seeing the point.
It's like when you have like a 1990 car and all that requires is maintenance and you're spending hundreds and thousands of dollars on maintenance. Maybe it's time to get a new car. Maybe it's time to level up.
Maybe it's time to walk away, like Kelly Clarkson said. We are rounding up on the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and move us into our final part of the show where we share one life lesson that we wish the listeners would take away from our story and our journeys. And then we offer up a manifestation so the collective energy gets a little bit more positive today. So if you had to think about your situationship or getting married at 19 or being more intentional with your relationships, what's something that you would want to pass on to our listeners?
That love doesn't always mean sacrifice. That if you have to sacrifice yourself for the love that you're trying to give or to love someone, then it's not the right kind of love. Because when we talk about love includes you. And if it brings you to a dark space, an emotional space, a space that takes away your peace, that's not good. So definitely choose you every time. I don't care what people say, if it's selfish or not. Choose you every time. When it comes to your happiness, what do you want? Bring people in your life that are worthy of you. But first of all, learn your worth, learn your value, create a home within yourself, and then you'll be unmovable, unshakable. When people come visit your home, you allow them to come in or not.
I love that. I'm going to second that and then add, no one's giving a prize out because you endured a relationship until you couldn't handle it anymore. It's okay to decide on day one of not liking it that you don't like it anymore and you can move on. I think we just end up extending our circumstances until they feel dramatic or catastrophic enough to leave, because that first day that we don't like something, our initial gut is like, but that's okay. It'll get better. And it's okay to sit there and go, Well, no one's going to give me a prize for waiting around for it to get better. What's your manifestation for people to take going forward to add back into the collective energy?
Kind of like the mantra that I use every day, which is the universe is mine. I deserve the world. Everything that I want and need is already mine, and I am successful in every aspect.
I think I'm going to manifest that for the people who are listening, knowing that they have to start being more truthful with themselves. I hope that that truth goes down like a spoonful of sugar, because I remember how hard it was for me to be truthful with myself and then to keep that up every day. And I'm happier for it, but I hope that yours goes easier. Gisselle, thank you so much for being here today and for your time this afternoon. I appreciate it so much.
You're welcome. I had so much fun.
I had a great time. Make sure that the listeners know all of the places that they can connect with you.
Of course. So you can find me at The Strong Sunflowers. We are mostly on Instagram, but you can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, YouTube, all that stuff. And then I also have a YouTube channel. It's called G is for Growth, and you can find that under Gisselle Herrera, which is my name. But that's all about, you guessed it, growth. And I talk about all the things: relationship, money, growth, traveling, finances, all that good stuff. So
it will all be in the show notes, including all of the ways to find us on Instagram and on all of the different platforms and Patreon and anything else you could want at a Team Tolerator. So remember out there, tolerators, you don't have to smile through anything you're tolerating, including a relationship that brings you more maintenance than it does joy. Smiles are for joy.